Morning, everybody. I hope you've all had a great reading week and got lots of R&R. I know I didn't, but I hope you did. For me, it means more work and client work to put myself through school. But anyways, I hope yours was restful and rejuvenating. So today we're covering After Effects, and I'm going to give you a basic tour here and teach you some basic skills and principles about using it. So let's get started and get going. I don't know if you noticed there, but I have two versions of After Effects. I have the Creative Cloud now, as well as my regular CS6. Still prefer the CS6 because I'm not fond of having to pay Adobe for the use of this project, this particular program. So anyways, here we are. We've opened After Effects, and as you can see, there's several ways to start working, and today we are going to open a new project. So when we get here, you'll see that it looks similar to Premiere, very similar, a matter of fact. And again, all Adobe products have that wonderful thing where you roll over things and they tell you what they are, as well as quick keys and things being very similar, although there are some changes between Premiere and After Effects in how quick keys are used. And we'll cover that as we go along. So to begin with, we're going to start with what looks just like Premiere's, which is the project panel. And here you can access and place and organize all your usable footage and photos or audio to be used. So again, you'll drop your footage in here and you'll see the individual pieces as you click on them show up in here. So next to it we have our composition panel. And everything you do in your timeline, which is down here, you will see in working condition up in the composition area. So we'll talk about importing files now. There's several ways to do it in this program, as there is in all Adobe products and most computer programming. There's always 100 ways to do the same thing. So let's have a look here, and we can go up to the File menu and choose File, and we can go down to Import, and as you can see, you can choose File or multiple files depending on what you want to do. So that's one way of doing it. And then you can come along, if you have your file finder open, you can come along and select the ones that you want and drag and drop them into place like that, and it imports them. Or another way is double clicking your project panel to bring things over in that way. So there we have it. Note the project panel. You can see the footage and some basic information about your pieces. When you slide this over, you can see the paths and the point, the frames, and the size of the files. I believe there's even more under here, but we won't be using that today. So here we go. Let's see. So first thing to do is create a new composition. So we can do this again in several different ways. First off, you could drag and drop your footage into your timeline, and that's great. It will set it based on the settings of the footage when you do this. In other words, the settings that are inherent in that particular piece of film that you've dropped in will supersede anything that's there before it and place those settings in place. So another way is to go up to File and choose New, oh, pardon me, go up to Composition and choose New Composition. That works great too, and that way you can save the settings the way you wish them to be. Or you can go Command N and set up that way. Today we will just be clicking and dragging our piece, and we'll drop it into the timeline there. So as you can see, we have a piece of footage. It's a slow-mo footage of a puddle of water that I thought was quite lovely. And anyways, I've just taken 3 unrelated clips, one of them being an Illustrator file that you can see here of a logo from a client of mine. And also, while we're here, you can see that it has now created a composition of the puddle. So you can see here it's auto-named it puddle, and it is what it is. So let's stop that for a second. So when you drag an item over the timeline, as we did just now, you're actually choosing where it's going to be placed on the timeline. So if you watch that again, I could actually take that and place it far away from the beginning where I dropped it. So in fact, it's choosing the place where that will begin when you click and drag. If you drag and drop it over the composition panel, you are actually choosing where it's going to be placed, as you can see here. Now you can always change that and move it around again, but essentially that is the difference between the 2 methods of placing. So here I'm going to drop it in there, and it dropped it right at the beginning of the timeline because I dropped it in this side rather than along the timeline counter. So we're going to talk about a few tips and tricks that you can use while you're in there. The first one can be quite frustrating. So if we drop more than one clip in here, and perhaps the logo, you can see that the puddle has obscured everything. So if we want to move the position of where things are occurring, you'll want to click on that layer and move it. But when you do that, it selects them all for some weird reason. They have it working that way. But if you go into where the type is written, and this is the real trick, and you can see then the other photograph or the other movie comes to the forefront. And again, we can move that so the logo then appears right on top. So that's pretty cool, but it can also be frustrating if you start grabbing at different areas of this timeline piece here, and you can't figure out how to move your different sections. So there's different ways to resize an object in. So if we click the actual layer and we choose the letter S, you'll see that down here we now see a stopwatch and the word scale. And this is great because we can affect the size of whatever it is that we're working with. And if you continue on here and you now choose P, you'll be able to affect where we place the logo. Might take a few moves. But you can see that we can move that logo wherever we want. And if you reselect that and choose R, it now brings up the rotation, and you can simply do that and choose the rotation you wish to have your piece in. But we want to make sure it's nice and square, so I'm just going to Command Z and move it back to where it was. So if you choose T, you'll see it brings up the opacity, and of course we can play with opacity of the piece and make it fade in and out if we wish, but we'll leave it at 100%. So these are wonderful things to do. If you choose to shift and pick up R and S, you can see you've opened all different ones here. So do be aware, you can do that holding shift and add P and have all of those wonderful tools to work with at the same time. And as you can see, these little arrows reveal the things that are under there, and you can see it opens your full palette of choices. The quick keys just make everything faster to work on. So if you hold Command and choose page up or down, you can see again that it moves the project frame by frame, moving throughout the piece if you continue, and then you can move backwards as well by going and holding Command and page down, and it moves it backwards. And you are going absolutely frame by frame. So you can be very specific with your changes and places where you want to stop. So we'll talk about a few of the different things in this area on the timeline. Choosing the eyeball, of course, will isolate and remove that area temporarily for you to work on. Hitting solo, this little white button here is the solo key, and that just lets you work on the one individual layer at a time. Let's turn off the audio so nobody's hearing the weird sounds, although I think the puddle dripping is kind of cool, but I don't think there's much on it. So just to keep the background noise down while we're working, I will turn those off. Do note that you have a timer here, and you can either adjust by frame or where you are in a minute, so you can actually choose where you want to be using this. And do remember that this counts hours, minutes, seconds, and the last number here is counting frames. So keep that in mind. It's a handy tool to have. So on to animation. So we can animate all of those features that we talked about when we clicked here on this, and we added, for instance, let's see, let's choose place, and let's animate the place of the logo. So if we hit P while we're on that layer, it comes up with position. And you can see the position is there. It tells us exactly where it's plotted on the surface. But if we go ahead and we click, we come back to the front. Actually, you know what? Let's start this a little there. And we'll bring it in from the end a little bit too, maybe. There we go. Well, we'll move that one first, and then this one. So the logo won't start right at the beginning. It'll start a second or two in. So if we come here and we take note of the stopwatch again, in After Effects, the stopwatch and Premiere always means to animate. So keep that in mind. That is your animation tool. And clicking it will put a keyframe in place, as you can see right here. And that keyframe is blue right now. And as we move along, we can make it adjust the position. So let's say in about 15 seconds, it'll be a little less because we've started in here, we're going to change the position of where this lies. Not that way, but let's go there. And we're going to go and move it across the board right into its own place right here. And as you can see, it has made another keyframe. Now if we come right back to the beginning and scrub back and hit play, we can now see that, oh, there's the logo, and it continues all the way across the picture frame. And comes to rest at the end in a 15-second time period, where it will then stay, unless we were to add another keyframe, and that would make it change again in some way. We could have opacity click in and fade it right off the page. So you can add multiple animations in multiple different ways. So simply done. You've already animated once. So let's take a look at what we have here. So we have two other film clips, and I'm going to say perhaps the eyeball clip shouldn't start right away, and we should see a little bit of the dripping occurring here, simply with that. And then we'll have our logo show up and begin to move across the page. And voila, there is our eyeball. Now our eyeball is far too small for the page, so let's select it, and we'll select to resize it. And we'll do that by clicking, making sure we're clicked on the layer and selecting S. And as you can see, we can scale it. And because I haven't hit the rotation or the stopwatch, no animated effects have taken place yet. So let's bring this to the beginning, and now you can see that things are starting to move along. The eyeball comes in place, and very good. Very speculative eyeball. So that's not really what we're after, so let's try animating again. And we're going to animate opacity, which is the letter T this time. And we're going to start at the beginning of the eyeball, and we're going to start it at 0. So the moment we click the stopwatch, so we start at 0, and if we scrub across, you'll see that you don't see it any longer. It's completely gone. But if we move our scrubber to the next place we want to be, and let's say we'll line it up with the keyframe of when the logo ends here, we can now move this to 100% opacity. And then if we move it again we can slowly have it fade away. Let's just open this up a little more. We can slowly have it fade away to 0 again. And again, a keyframe was automatically created by changing the values of the opacity. Oh, not quite to where we want it. Oh, why doesn't it want to go? There. Oh. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got now. As you can see, we slowly have our eyeball beginning to follow the logo. And as it moves along, it comes to a crest here at 100% and starts to reduce again. So the opacity of the layer of the eyeball is now slowing down and fading off into the distance. And as it reaches our final keyframe, it will fade all the way away into nothing. And we are back to the water. And now it should reach a value of 0. So that's pretty neat. So another thing about keyframes is they're quite movable, so you can move them around. This has selected all of them. And this, if you choose one, it will select the individual. And you can move that or bring it back in place. So just something more that you can do. You can select all of them by holding Shift and clicking on them, or you should be able to click and drag across them as well. And that selects all of them, so you can move as a group. So now let's take a look at the effects panel. And over here on the right hand side, you can see there's more information, and you can find out information here about the movie Puddle, as well as audio information, and close panel, and effects is where we want to be. So in here you can find any effect, probably a lot more effects than you ever could in Premiere to apply to a piece, and that's partly why we use After Effects for special effects. It's because Premiere is already such a large program that to put them both together would make it really very, very large programming, and it would be very ineffective for people to use. So anything that you can think of, Blur for instance, will pull up every single effect with the word blur on it. So let's grab one, and we're going to drag it to this layer and see what it does. So let's turn off the other layers and have a look. And well, I'm not seeing much, but that's probably because we have not opened it up to take a look at what can be done with the blur tool. So as you see, as we move along, the blur increases or decreases. So we could begin this image really crisp with no blur, and hitting the stopwatch should begin that for us. And then if we move our timeline across, we should be able to increase the blurriness of the piece. So let us see what that has done. Start out nice and brilliant, and we move along. It's rendering, so it's taking its sweet time about doing so and has slowed down the slow motion even more. But that's all right. It will begin to blur the piece as we watch it go. So as you can see, as it's moving along the timeline, it actually begins to blur far more. It's rendering, so it's taking a really long time to do so, but that's all right. And there we go. We can see that it's really blurring the piece now. So that is how you use effects, but this isn't about effects. The effects are for you to explore as you go along. Look through them, but do know that it is very much like Premiere, and you don't want to try and memorize them all because you're going to spend your life memorizing them because there are so many different ones to use. So anyways, if you look up here on the effects control panel, you can also see that there is an effect here. And let's stop for a second. And if we turn off that, it turns the effect completely off, and we go back to our normal thing. And you can also reset it so it goes back to 0 again. And that is the effects panel. And one effect anyways. So if your computer begins to struggle, turning off effects as you work can help. But also do keep in mind that you should, whenever possible, work with full resolution. But if your computer is struggling, you can certainly move to a half or a third or even a quarter to work more efficiently. Let's see. So let's take a look at the text tool. Up at the top, you'll see many tools familiar to you from other programming of Adobe's. But the text tool here has, if you see a little square in the corner, and when you click it, it does that. And as you can see, when you hover over your image or your movie, your T-bar occurs and you can begin to start typing. And it's pretty small, so let's select it. And you can come over here to your right-hand side again under your effects presets, and you can see that you can choose your font style. We'll go with impact. It's nice and bold, and we can come in, increase the size of it so it's much larger. Okay, so I seem to be having RAM problems already, and you can see we can change the color. And oops, I suppose if we select it all, we can change the color. There we go. And go OK. So as you can see, you can make it larger, and you can add stroke to it. Now, these ones here, vertical scale and horizontal scale, are something that you should really never use. Stretching fonts is frowned upon in the business world, and there's many reasons for it. It changes how a serif looks. It changes thicknesses and weights. When you make these changes, it's best to do them in Illustrator and then import them as a file. Um, it's just bad form to do it in a program like this. So do avoid these two particular things. They're not nice. Again, you can affect the same things. You can choose colors from your actual project by selecting here. And now we've made it brown. And I kind of like the red better, so I'll go back here. And if we click off of the text, you can see that we now have text that moves. And if you look down in your timeline, all those same things are in play. So I hit the letter S while I was on the text layer, and as you can see, we can now play with scale of the text. And if we hit P, we can play with where the text is. So, and all the animation features are right there with the stopwatch, and you can make your text grow across the page. You can make your images appear smaller across the page, adjust the color, the style, the boldness, give it stroke if you want to. Do all those wonderful things that you can do in any of these programs. So something else we can do in After Effects is we can add layers to it. So if we wanted to put a solid layer in, you can see here under Layer New, you can do many things, but we're going to choose Solid. And we'll make it a black solid. And note this button right here, Make Comp Size. When you choose this, it's going to make it the same size as your composition, which can be really important if you're trying to do certain things. So now we're going to make a mask here, and we're going to make a vignette, a simple vignette that everybody will see and use at some point. So if you go up to your upper toolbar here, you can see that we can choose shapes, and it's set on rectangle right now, but we will click on it and we're going to choose the ellipse tool. So with the ellipse tool, you can see you can make circles. You can hold shift and be very specific about the shape of your circle, and you can also double click it, and double clicking it makes it the size, the comp size of your whole composition. So there, if you look down, it has created a mask here, and in this mask area you can see that across from this thing you can see it says add and has an arrow. Now what we're going to do is under here you can see there's many things you can do, but you can subtract, and this is what will give us our mask of a vignette. So there we've got our vignette built. And note the blackness is now on the outside of the shape instead of the inside. So now that we're here, that's a pretty solid looking black edge that we have happening, and perhaps that's not really what we want to have. So if you go to your mask layer and hit F on your keyboard, sorry. Yes, you will see that it has brought the mask feather up. So F for feather. And then to the right, you'll see a scale again. And if we play with that scale, it should, there we go, soften that. So there we go. Let's get off of that. And now you can see that we have a nice soft vignette around it rather than that harsh dark circle that we had. So you can also create custom masks by using a pen tool and choose any shape you like to create a mask with. But we won't do that right now. So another thing we can do is choose that layer and come along here, and if we click out and then back on them, you can see that it's created toggles. So if we come here and we're going to animate this mask, and if we choose the masked layer and we hit MM on our keyboard, we can see that it pulls up another thing here. Oops, we're on the text layer, it looks like. So we'll try that again. MM. Oop. And we will start the position here. No, why is it going there? Okay, so mask, MM, there we go. No, still didn't do it. There we go. MM. Wow, it keeps wanting to jump to this text tool. So let us get rid of the text layer, and that will solve that problem. Okay, I see what I did. So let's try that over again. So we're going to restart that mask, and let's go MM. And let's see. So we have a keyframe here, and we're going to hit position. And now this is going to allow us to scrub ahead. And if we click out of there, okay, there it was. Now you see it's pulled up toggles and handles like it would in Illustrator or Photoshop. And here we can change the shape of our mask, and that should give us another keyframe. No, I must have removed the keyframe. So there's the first keyframe. Aha. So if we come back here, what is it doing? Let me go back a couple. There we go. So here we have our full one. We will scrub ahead. Let's not go so far ahead. And let's make some changes. So we will go position, position. Okay. And then scrub ahead a bit. And you can see if we do this, and we do this, we should have another keyframe, which is not coming up. Anyways, I will leave that one for you to try. The instructions are there, and it should work just fine. Why I'm having issues here while I'm doing this recording is another story, but the instructions, trust me, they work well. Do follow them, and you can create animated vignettes that move in and out and have some fun. So I hope this was informative for you. So I'm going to talk to you about one last thing. We're going to talk about how to import things between After Effects and Premiere. So if we save this file, we'll save it as tour, and I'll save it to my desktop, and we're going to save it as an After Effects project, just like that. Say save, and then we'll shut down After Effects. And we'll open up Premiere Pro CC. Give it a moment to open up. It's really interesting what this does. Doing this, it allows for several things. It allows for a direct line to your After Effects file. So once you've put it in Premiere, if you do it the way I'm showing you here, and you import your After Effects file into Premiere as a .aep file, so an After Effects project file, you can go back into After Effects if something doesn't look right once you've imported it into your Premiere file, and you can adjust those things, and it automatically updates your file in Premiere. So they are innately joined after this point. So we'll go New Project, and thank you very much, and yes, we will do that. So here we are, and we're going to go to File, Import, and it's going to pull up this, and I saved it to the desktop, so I called it Tour, and as you can see there's the tour, and we're going to go Import, and notice that it has pulled up a secondary window, and this window, once it stops thinking, should connect it to the dynamic link server that I was talking about earlier, and that will allow us to connect the files. It's taking some time to think. So there we are. So that was the name of our original file, remember? So if you're building many compositions within After Effects under the same composition, You will have many, so we could have done a puddle one, we could have created another new composition called something else, and they can all be stored together, and then you can select the one you want. And we know we want puddle, so we'll go OK. And there lies our puddle right here, and you can begin working with it just as normal. And as I said earlier, you may just move it back. If you need to make an adjustment on this file, you can choose to do so in After Effects, and you'll see that we are happening again here. So enjoy After Effects. It's my favorite out of the film production programming. I have a lot of fun in it because I can animate things that I take from Illustrator and bring in here, and enjoy the process because it is such a great program. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, and see you next week.